Welcome back to Mark Halbus' vlog, everyone. Thanks for joining in again today. Hey, you know what? Today is a different time and place than it was 5 years ago versus 10 years ago. Cars have changed, the landscape's changed. Everything today seems to be going pure electric or hybrid. It's changing like the workplace is changing. Companies are getting more efficient, they're doing more work with less amount of people, and the same thing goes for the automotive industry. Now, car manufacturers are creating vehicles that put down similar horsepower with less number of cylinders, upping the efficiency. How are they doing that? With forced induction, with hybrid technology, a lot of different things for the sake of improving efficiency. But when we're talking about cars, efficiency is one thing, but driving experience and excitement is totally different. And that's why really today I want to talk about the F Type R, for example, or any F Type Jag for that matter. It truly is a last of a dying breed. And I'll tell you, that's also why I bought the car, because there aren't too many great selections like this. But to my point, why I'm talking about the Jag being such an exceptional buy is because what's starting to happen in the future. And the C-Class Mercedes, did you hear the new generation that's coming out will no longer have a V8 engine? They won't even go down to a V6. Instead, what Mercedes is saying, in the brand new C-Class AMG, or if there's an equivalent AMG car, all it's going to be is likely a turbo 4-cylinder engine, probably boosted up hard. And they say all they're going to do is supplement that with a little bit extra hybrid technology to bump up the power a bit. You see, this goes to the whole efficiency, but taking away from the ultimate driving dynamics. Sure, the numbers on paper might look the same, 0 to 60. I would suspect it'll be great numbers, but you still lack some of that soul and heart that you have from that 6.2 liter V8 that they used to have. And even the current generation twin turbo 4 liter is also a great engine. And as I said, I drove the current C63 and it is an exceptionally great engine. But before I keep rambling on about that, I'm gonna have to take my son to hockey. Actually, I'm coaching this year, or helping coach his hockey team. And so we're gonna head on down to the rink here right away and show you what that looks like. And then when we get back, I'm gonna fire up the F Type and go for a ride, and we'll talk about the rest of the subject. Let's go. But before we dive into the video, of course, we'll talk about featured comment today, which is by Jeff Baker from last video, who commented, "You've got to pay to play, and life's way too short to drive boring cars." And I couldn't agree more, Jeff. Thanks for reaching out. I really do appreciate it. That truly is a motto that I live by. Life is too short. You don't want to have regrets. And if you guys follow my other channel, Exotic Car Play Place, then you'll know that I talk a lot about reliability, depreciation, cost, good buys, bad buys, all of those things. And those are all very important factors. But at the end of it all, the number one important factor is life is too short to drive boring cars. All that other information just helps us make smart decisions along the way. But I'll be honest, if I'm flipping a coin and I'm trying to make a decision on a car purchase, the driving excitement, dynamic, and the features and the looks and the style and the sound are all going to weigh a lot more heavy than reliability. Again, as I spoke in previous videos, you know, reliability is always an important factor for me, and I talk about it a lot in my other channel. You don't want a car that's going to spend all of its time in the shop. But the reality is, most of these cars, even though they're a little bit pricey to maintain and repair, most of them are not that horribly unreliable. The N54 that I had that was an exception, and I kicked that to the curb. But outside of that, a little extra added expense is well worth the cost of admission. So that's where I come from. Thanks, Jeff. And that's really ultimately, I think, words to live by. Good hockey again. Hey, buddy, excited to go on?
Yeah.
I know it's been a bit of a hiatus. We haven't been able to play for some time. But now here, fortunately, in Edmonton, we're allowed to get back on the ice in small numbers, right? All right, let's head on into the rink. And yeah, you can get one of these masks on my other channel, Exotic Car Play Place. That's where I sell these. But anyway, let's get rolling. Excited, buddy?
Yeah.
All right, it was a great day at hockey, but now let's talk more about that whole topic about why the F Type is one of my favorite cars, and as well why, if you're a true car enthusiast, you may in fact want to buy one for yourself. But it's this cold start is one example of why you probably want to look at considering buying an F Type if you're a real automotive enthusiast. Here, let's check it out. We'll do a cold start. here we are. So the next generation of sports cars happen to do a lot more with hybrid technology. Now they're doing things that are smaller engines, more turbos, hybrids, things like that, where they use less cylinders and more efficiency, as I said already before. Look at the Arturo by McLaren. There's the talk of the V6 McLaren now in the sports car series, where they're using a V6 engine, hybrid essentially. How about the Ferrari Sf90? That's right, the Stradale. So you can see how the market's actually been trending for quite some time now, to the point where we're sort of on the horizon, or we've climbed the peak of the mountain, and now we're looking over a whole new horizon. And what's over that horizon is the new land of small engines, hybrid, plug-in hybrid, pure electric, all of that goodness. Well, if you call it goodness for pure car enthusiasts, a lot of it is not so much goodness, but there are some positives in that, and I do want to talk about some of that, and I'm really excited about some of the technology and the way some of it's utilized, but not entirely. Now, you look at BMWs, for example, they've swapped out their straight sixes way back. In the E90 generation cars, they had the straight sixes, and then they sort of shut that down, and they went with, instead of, for example, the 330, which was their straight six engine, and it's the engine that everybody wanted to have. If you didn't want the M3, you would get a 330. But instead, now a 330 is a turbo 4-cylinder engine. So it's not quite the same. Sure, it's more efficient, and in some cases now it's even better performing. But that's just, they're working on the technology, dialing it in and making it even more efficient. Sure, that's great, but the driving dynamics are disappearing. Another thing that's disappearing is the manual transmission. BMW has pretty much kissed that goodbye. Other than a couple of offerings lately in the M3, M4 cars, there's small little resurgence in a couple of the M cars, like the M2 Competition. You can get it as an option. But really the mainstream, it's gone. BMW's kicked that to the curb. Audi, they're using that goofy transmission in some of their cars. That CVT, which is as sterile and as testicular torsion inducing as one can possibly imagine. So they've been doing that for a while. So a lot of these manufacturers have been getting rid of V6s, V8s for some time and replacing them with 4-cylinder engines. I mean, even our car, we have the C300 Benz. A C300 used to be a V6 and now it's a turbo 4. So it's a great car. I love driving it. But again, it's a sign of things to come. Look at even McLaren. Now in their sports car series, they're producing a car coming over the horizon called the Arturo, which is a V6 now. No longer are they throwing the 3.8 or the 4-liter V8 engine in every one of their models. They're actually scaling it back on some of their lower end sports models to a V6, which again can be good to a point. It creates that scaling effect and sort of gives priority to those people in the supercar land that want the best, latest, and the greatest, that you don't all have sort of essentially the same engine. So there is sort of a pecking order established there in the McLaren world. A friend of mine here just recently bought a Ferrari Sf90. Now, the Stradale or the Spider, beautiful cars. Can't wait to see it. Haven't seen it yet. Expect to see it maybe later this summer. But there you've got a different situation. That's where the technology excites me. Where Ferrari takes an already amazing machine, an amazing drivetrain, and they've gone and used the hybrid technology to boost it up even more. Do you remember the McLaren P1? Same thing. They didn't just replace with a smaller engine and then offset it with hybrid just to equalize it and bring it where it was 2 generations before. No, they're maximizing the fuel engine and then they're topping it up with a little bit of hybrid technology. So that's what Ferrari's doing essentially with the Sf90, Stradale, and Spider. As well, another friend has recently purchased the Lamborghini Sian, which of course too is Lamborghini's first attempt at producing a bit of a hybrid vehicle. Obviously, with that, the hybrid technology is only a small top-up. It's not a massive upgrade, not like BMW's i8. When they did that, everybody got all excited until they saw that it was a 3-cylinder gas engine. I think they kind of blew it there. That's an example of where manufacturers were trying to compensate for horsepower and displacement with electric hybrid. Sure, it was a looking into the future, but now nobody wants those cars. They're not overly reliable. There's been problems with them along the way. And the big thing, of course, with that is once that the batteries wear out on what you'd perceive as a bit of an entry-level supercar, it's going to be very, very expensive. So the i8 wasn't ideal. In my opinion, they would have used, say, for example, an M5 competition engine with, say, 620 horsepower, and then topped it up with an electric hybrid, maybe another 150 horsepower on top of that, maybe 200 horsepower extra, and then you're into real territory. Of course, then you'd be replicating more of the lights of the Ferrari or the Porsche 918 Spyder or the LaFerrari or the P1 by Mclaren. I mean, those are the manufacturers that did it right. They built up the gas engine as far as they could go comfortably, and then they added to it. So that's where I can get excited. The problem is it's the mainstream that's not doing it that way. And the mainstream, where you're dealing in vehicles that, say are $150,000 and less, that's what I consider kind of the mainstream. Once you're into supercar territory, you're looking 250, 300 plus. And so it's not until you get into that range where you can get some of those kind of exciting drivetrains. I mean, the Acura NSX is sort of bridging that gap. That's sort of stalled out in between those 2 points. It's not full on, hypercar, supercar, but it's better than your garden variety sports car. So it's somewhere in the middle. And I think Acura was onto something, maybe beef up the base engine a little bit, and I think they'd really be onto something. But the Acura NSX is a great example, I think, of a car that would be fun to drive that uses both types of technology. Otherwise, outside of that, what else do you have? You either have, a mild Lexus or a Hyundai hybrid vehicle, which essentially is just that. It's more about economy and certainly not about performance. And either that, or you have to spend, $800,000 to get into the real level of performance where they add it on, and the performance really is really derived from both gas and electric. And those cars I can get excited about, but I can't get excited about a lot of these manufacturers now scaling engines back, downsizing. I mean, even Jaguar, and this is why the F Type R and F Types in general are so important to me. And I think if you guys are enthusiasts, maybe at least give them a look, because the F Type is really, really an awesome car. And I think it represents almost the end of an era, if you will. I mean, look at BMW where they're going. I mean, sure, they've still got the M cars, but I can't help but think that those are on borrowed time as well. I mean, those are on the tipping point. And the reason I say that is it all boils down to sales, and sales success drives the business. If the cars aren't selling, you know what's going to happen there too, sadly enough. So hopefully enthusiasts keep buying these cars and recognize and have the appreciation for these cars. And the F-Type is the exact car. This is the last of the honest sports car. There's no real electric drivetrain here. It's pretty much a good old small block Ford with a supercharger blowing on the back of it to give it that extra little oomph. Other than that, besides the sound and the thrust and all the excitement and all of that it delivers, there's very few cars that can deliver that. And honestly, guys, that's where I'm coming from today. The F-Type is the end of an era because Jaguar is transitioning to pure EV. As a matter of fact, a lot of countries, if you look within 5 to 10 years now, go to a lot of places in Europe. There's already mandates by the time you're at, 2030, 2035, there will be no allowed internal combustion engines on the streets anymore. They're going to be all electric vehicles. And while there's some greatness there, I mean, it's great for a commuter, but those back road drives on a Sunday morning just won't exist anymore. You won't get the thrill that you get out of some of these old school cars. And that's a sad, sad state of affairs for me. So we know a lot of it's driven by regulators, but we also know a lot of it's driven by competition. Where one manufacturer does this, another manufacturer decides it needs to ante up. The biggest sellout, in my opinion, was Porsche when they built the Cayenne. Now, the Cayenne is developed to a point where it's a great vehicle. There's no doubt about it. And the Macan is also one of their best-selling vehicles. That's what actually kept the company afloat. Because back in the early 90s, Porsche was ready to almost go under. They almost had to give up on the 911. But it's because of the high sales volumes resulting from the SUV market allowed Porsche to keep expanding on their sports cars. So for that, I am grateful. But SUVs in general aren't as exciting, and generally I don't think they're meant to be exciting. They're utilitarian by their very nature, and that's really what they're about: hauling the family, the kids, tow the boat, haul the lumber, whatever it is. That's what they're made for. They're also good for poor weather driving, and they're very versatile, so I can see why people love them. My wife loves SUVs, and they're very, very popular. So I have to say, even Lamborghini is almost selling out. The new Lamborghini Urus is going to come out with likely a gas-electric hybrid as well. So they're joining the family, the ranks of the Porsche and the Audi cars as well, the SUVs, so it will also follow suit. Now, part of that could be compliance with regulators, part of that could be just getting on the bandwagon, such as Porsche did with the Cayenne. Regardless, suffice it to say, Lamborghini's also getting in that wagon. So for me, one of the big things is kind of essentially the jewelry that you see under the hood. For example, I'll show you. Pop the hood. Look at that. I mean, look at the jewelry under the hood. You don't get that in an electric hybrid vehicle. I mean, if you're talking about, for example, a pure electric vehicle, when you pop the hood, what are you going to see? It's going to look like a Fisher-Price toy, an overgrown Fisher-Price toy that you would buy for your kids when they were a baby. Remember, you buy that toy, you go down to Toys R Us and you buy that new toy. They can ride around, you plug in that battery. Well, that's essentially the same thing. It's an overgrown version of those little toys your kids used to drive around in. You know, a little mini Jeep or a little mini Ferrari. Those are the things that we will be driving around in 10 years from now. So yet another reason other than the jewelry under the hood, the sound of the exhaust, is the way they look. There's not a lot of other vehicles out there that are sculpted like this and have the curves of an F-Type other than getting into an Aston Martin. And my fear is actually what's starting to happen with all this electric hybrid technology is there's going to be many manufacturers sharing the same underpinnings, and all you're going to have is rebadging from brand to brand, and you're going to have one or two key big players, and they're going to have 10 different lineups and 10 different sub-brands, and you think you're driving something original, but the reality is, you know, most of those vehicles are going to be very much the same. Look at Chevy, GM, Buick, Pontiac. They're all the same. They had a lot of different sub-brands of the same vehicle, rebadged many times over. Look at Volkswagen Audi Group. Even sometimes with some Porsches, there's lots of sharing going on there. You're going to have more and more of that as technology gets more complex. What you're going to find is more rebadging and less originality. And this is all about originality. The F-Type is original, and that's why this is a great time to get into one, because these cars will not last. These unique vehicles, I fear, will eventually disappear, and the true enthusiasts will be stuck driving around in something pure electric like a Fisher-Price toy. So I am cautiously optimistic that I hope a lot of this really high-end technology that you're seeing in the Ferraris and the Lamborghinis now eventually trickle down into the mainstream to where those cars are phenomenally good. I really do hope that's the case, and I am looking forward to the future. I'm not all about, you know, the old car is the only way to go. I mean, I'm about technology. I'm about looking forward and finding the best solution. But I think we've honestly optimized where the true driving enthusiast needs to be. We've got vehicles that put down 6, 7, 800, even 900 horsepower today. Way too much power for a common person like myself to be able to drive around on the street. It's pretty much a track machine. So we've optimized that. So where do we go from here? It feels like we're going to start dialing it back. We're going to start buzzing around like the Jetsons in these pure little buzzy electric vehicles with, you know, 85 horsepower and lock and load. You basically turn it on, go to sleep, wake up when you get there. And I feel that that's kind of where it's going, but I hope not. And I'm cautiously optimistic. I do believe that there's some awesome technology when you start strapping the electric tech on top of the motorized tech. You can potentially see some great gains, and I'm really excited. And hopefully I get a chance to take a closer look at that Sf90 this year, because from what I've seen of those, and I've seen videos so far from other YouTubers, and honestly, that car looks spectacular. Still makes the sounds, and that's the key. The sounds, the feel, the thrust. I mean, that Sf90 is everything it needs to be. So I am very much excited for what the future holds. But for now, I feel that there will be a lull. And unless you have, you know, a 7-figure bankroll for a sports car, I feel that we're going to have to wait a while before we get that kind of exciting driving dynamic. So for now, until that 7-figure technology is available in a 5-figure car, you can get into maybe an F-Type Jag or a C8 Corvette, TTRS Audi, maybe even an Alfa Romeo Quadrifoglio. Those are great cars. So even the 4C Alfa Romeo went away because of a lack of sales. It's sad because those are such great drivers' cars. And I hate to see that eventually these cars are starting to disappear because of popularity, and as well as because this new technology, electric vehicles are coming on strong and furious, and it's pushing these other vehicles out the back door. It's a sad, sad state, but get a hold of one of these great drivers' cars while you can, because there's going to be less and less of them available. So again, everybody, I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to drop a line in the comment section and let me know. Maybe I'll grab your comment on the next video and we can discuss it in full. But for now, just enjoy what you've got. If you can afford it, step out there and maybe buy something that's a little bit more out there, because again, I think within 10, 15 years, we'll be riding electric buggies around like the Jetsons. For now, hope to see you guys real soon. Catch you then. Bye-bye.